World.
What up, bros?
What up, bros?
And welcome to Bruh Meets World,
What is Bruh Meets World?
your Boy Meets World fan cast. I'm Ceej.
I am Tony Curtis.
Tony Toto. It feels like it's been forever, and I think it's only been like 2 weeks.
Yeah, like we haven't. Well, you know what? You did some traveling, and
Yes.
obviously, I think, just for our listeners, just transparency, we were kind of figuring out what we wanted this episode to be, what we wanted it to look like. Obviously, this is our last hurrah. It's our last real deep dive into the series. So we had a lot that we wanted to cover. So I'm glad that we figured it out, and we're here, and we're putting it out to the universe.
We're putting it out. We're doing it. We're doing things.
Doing the damn thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a long time coming. We are still listening to Pod Meets World for those of you who are following our Pod Meets World reacts on our Patreon. That is patreon.com/BruhMeetsWorld. And there's been quite a bit of Boy Meets World news as well, like all over the place. I think season 5, they're going to have a lot to cover.
We talked about this a little bit on the Patreon already, but just for everyone, just for y'all, it's the last episode. Fuck it. We're throwing it out for free. The Trina interview that happened with the comedian Godfrey, you can watch her full interview on YouTube where she discusses Boy Meets World and more candidly than I've ever heard her speak about it ever, I would say.
Yeah.
She definitely told some stories that she already told, but in terms of kind of talking about Ben Savage specifically, or even her relationship with Will, it just felt like she felt very free to speak. I encourage everyone to check it out. I think it definitely adds more nuance to the conversation around what happened with Angela. So yeah, definitely encourage you guys to check it out.
Absolutely. And then, there was that. I was actually thinking about Danielle. She's been on a little tour on podcast saying things about I have people sending me clips about her appearances on other podcasts where she talks about the weight episode and stuff like this. So it's going to be, I feel like season 5, which is what they're on, is going to be a journey for them.
Sure.
And we'll get into this when we do our series report cards or whatever. But I think season 5 has a lot more lows, not more lows than highs, but then a lot more lows than we were giving. Remember, at least for them, they're already struggling through the beginning of the season. So I think it's going to be fun.
It's funny. I think that they might struggle with season 5 a little bit, but I have to imagine in general that seasons 5, 6, and 7, which are the seasons that they remember the most, which are the seasons in which most of the actors were trying to decide, do I want to do this? Do I want to go to school? Do I want to take a break? There was just a lot about this period in their lives that I think is going to jog a lot of memories, some of which they probably haven't thought about since they, were 20 years old. So I think all of that is going to lead to great conversation. As Ceej mentioned, we are reviewing all of the Pod Meets World episodes on our Patreon. We will continue to do that going forward. So even if you guys, are missing out on our Boy Meets World specific convos, that's all on our Patreon.
All right, you guys. So let's get to the meat. Let's get to what you came for. And this,
I like it when you say "get to the meat" like that. Ooh.
You know I love that meat. I don't know why this became that kind of podcast, but anyway, you guys. We are doing our series report card today. That's right. We will be talking about all 7 seasons, and kind of going through our best of, our favorite characters, the things that we thought didn't really work, and just kind of looking at the series from a bird's eye view. Now that we've marathoned it, now that we've gone through 7 years of recapping, actually looking at this and being what do we think about the series as a whole? So hopefully you will enjoy this journey with us. We continue to love to hear from you. So make sure that you reach out to us at brummeetsworld@gmail.com or at brummeetsworld at all of the social platforms. Like you said, we want to hear from you. We want to hear your thoughts. We will be continuing to reach out to you, and we will be continuing to be on Pod Meets World. So even though we are wrapping up the series, we are not stepping away from your lives.
Not at all. Not at all. We around. We outside.
We outside. Not too much outside. It's hot.
Mm, so damn hot. I can't get into that. We have too much to discuss.
Okay, Tony, why don't you tell them about what we're doing this episode?
Yeah. Okay. So, first of all, I kind of wanted to just have like a you and me conversation about like what is our relationship with the show now versus what was it when we started the podcast. So
Yeah.
I'll pass that question to you, and yeah, let's discuss.
It is so weird because, like, if you would have told me that my life would be defined by Boy Meets World, like, I have my husband's friends will send me clips of Boy Meets World and stuff. Like, this is just like a really big defining part of my life. And I had that thought when we were recording our last episode of like, I just don't know if I ever would have thought that this show would be so big of a part of my life. It already
Yeah.
was foundational in like helping me see myself, helping me learn lessons. Um, but to see the fandom, like when we started this podcast, in all honesty, before Pod Meets World, even, I don't think we really knew the size of the audience. I knew it was really
Yeah.
impactful. I knew that millennials like really clung on to this show, but I didn't realize how huge the fan base is. In reality, Boy Meets World is kind of like in the realm of Gilmore Girls. And
Oh,
I don't
I
know.
was gonna say Brady Bunch in terms of just like never going away, finding new
Well, yeah,
audiences.
Brady Bunch, Gilmore Girls. Like what I'm saying is, all of these shows are ones where you wouldn't have thought from like you wouldn't have thought at the time and on the networks that they were
Mm,
on that these would be the shows that would be staying around. But
sure.
there was a little spark about these shows that actually made them really connect on a personal level
Yeah.
with audiences throughout time. And I just feel great that our name is now part of that conversation. It's really an honor.
You know what? You're so right. Like I was kind of thinking of the show as like analyzing art, but I love that you were kind of talking about just what this podcast impact has been on us. One of the things I feel like this podcast has done, in addition to like, you know, introducing us to a community and introducing us to these cast members who we
Yeah.
get to talk to. We're so lucky. In addition to all of that, it feels like I have learned so much about myself by deconstructing what I don't like about Boy Meets World. And when you started, you were like, I didn't know my life would be defined by Boy Meets World. I feel like my life has always kind of been defined by Boy Meets World in so many ways. Like this was a show I used to watch on repeat. This was a show I used to binge the entire 7 seasons before the start of every school year. Like just because it was summertime and I had no job, like shit like that. So like I think really as we've been dissecting this and really analyzing like what's good, what's not good, not only can I recognize with like adult eyes what isn't good, I can see how my 12-year-old self interpreted it. I can see how I like took those misinterpretations and applied them to my life in ways that were counterproductive. And I can see how, whether we're talking about Cory being an asshole or whatever it is, how the wrong things penetrated me in so many ways. So like when I'm reflecting on the show in terms of like the difference between my relationship with it now versus before we started, it's more of a personal show now. It's so much more personal than it was before. And before it was a show I loved, and now it just feels like it's in my DNA somehow. Like I don't know, in so many
It's funny
ways.
that you say that. To me, it's kind of like my cornerstone now. Like I think
Mm.
about analyzing television, I think about analyzing any kind of literature and media through like what we've done. We've done now an entire series. We have like overanalyzed, we've looked too closely, we haven't looked closely enough. We've learned about like the
Not
behind the scenes.
counting our movie makeovers, our mixtapes, our special episodes. We've talked about Boy Meets World for 158 episodes.
Yeah.
So like each episode's been about an hour. Like you know how they say you need like 100 hours to become an expert? We're here.
I think it's 10,000, but either way, we are
Okay.
well on that road, is my point. Like, yeah. No, and what I'm saying is, it really did make me like when I look at something now
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, what makes this different from Boy Meets World? And what I mean by that is, again, does it have that spark? Does it have like in-depth characters. Like I now appreciate one-off episodes because I'm like, oh, sometimes it seems weird, but that
Yeah.
one-off episode actually allows a writer or a character to become something different. I honestly like I've been watching House of the Dragons and so many people are like, this second season sucks and it's not good and blah blah blah. I was like, you got 8 episodes of character development. And the thing that you're complaining about is the fact that it didn't go where you wanted it to go,
Yeah.
even though they basically told you we we are going to do most of the action in the next season. This was a building season. Everyone
Yeah.
was complaining in the last season of Game of Thrones that everything went by too quickly and you never really got to understand why people were doing things. The second season of House of the Dragons actually building momentum and letting you see those things, and it had 8 episodes to do it. I look at it
Sure.
now and I'm like, we don't have the 22 episodes anymore that we used to have. Television used to be 22 episodes, and you would get time to play around with characters and learn new things. A lot of the stuff you and I don't like, but it still gives you more chances to take bigger swings. And now you have to get it right every single episode or the audience is just gone. And I think that that's kind of like what I miss now.
Yeah, it's so funny that you say that because I feel like this podcast has also made me a more sophisticated television viewer, like you were saying. I think that I have come to appreciate things like sitcoms, things like Sweeps Week, things like filler and holiday episodes in a way that it kind of changes my perspective on television now. So all of those things have been like really impactful. But one other thing that I forgot to mention in terms of how my relationship has changed with the show, and this kind of segues into our next portion, which is that I used to think about Boy Meets World as one series.
Yes,
I
I
now
love.
can see that, like, much like Taylor Swift, this show has eras.
Absolutely. You look at my
Eras.
notes.
No, honestly, I felt this way too, and I feel like this is a really normal thing to walk away with after watching a show like this. That like part of the reason, like Madonna, that it continued to stay relevant was due to reinvention. And so as we break down the seasons, we'll get into that. But I just think that that's something about this show that's unique versus some other shows I have, which feel like they're carrying around the same trope from season 1 through 7 or 8 seasons.
And it's really interesting on like whether or not you can do that well.
Mm,
Like there are so many TV shows that you're right, like they're pretty much picking up of like the idea that they had, the kernel that they had in season 1, and
hmm.
by season 7 or 8 or whatever, you're like, oh, you've outgrown this framework. And then
Yeah.
other times I think about all the other TGIF shows like Sabrina, where
Yes.
we end with that, you're like, what? She's at a newspaper, we have like these weird sets, we're on a new network.
Yeah.
And it's like I think about Scrubs. Like there are so many TV shows where it's like they also have eras, but it doesn't like they're jarring. And
Sure.
this did so in a way that didn't feel jarring at the time because it kind of grew as we grew.
Yeah.
That's another thing this is one of the very few TV shows that actually grew up with me,
Yeah.
and I can see it. And like down to Pod Meets World, it's just like,
Yeah.
oh, like I'm podcasting now, they're podcasting now, they're just like me,
Yeah.
like that's kind of a thing of being able to like see yourself and reflect in these characters. So I just think it's really interesting that Boy Meets World set itself apart by trying new things, by sometimes getting it very, very wrong, but for the most part, getting it right in such big ways that we all walked away with being like, I still want to reference this.
Yes. And a great example of that could even be just the transition into their college years, which is, I think, something that no television show has done well to transition the cast from high school to college. I even praised One Tree Hill for just being like, we're just going to skip this. We're just going to do a time jump. I don't want to deal with it because it's a very difficult thing. And even though we had so many complaints about Boy Meets World, it's still the one that did it better than all the others. So there's credit to give.
I wonder how much of that is the fact that we had half of the cast already go to college, and
Mm,
not really half. It was
yeah.
just Eric and Jack, but by having someone who was already in college, we were able to transition and
Yeah,
like we knew where we were going. It wasn't like brand new sets. It was like, oh no, we're just going to spend more time in this location. And I
definitely.
do wonder how much of that helped with like easing the audience into it, or how much of it was just the fact that we literally were growing up with these kids. So by the time they were in college, we were looking at colleges or like interested in college as a
I
concept.
was 9 years old when this show's ended,
I
but
know. I
but
you
I
know
get
what I'm
what you
saying.
mean. That like it felt like a natural maturity. It felt like seeing my older cousins just like going to their graduations and things like that. Like it just felt very similar to the progression that we all go through. I don't want to spend too much time here. I'm sorry. We have so much to talk about. Let's go ahead and merge into our season by season breakdown. Me and Ceej understand we have reviewed 158 episodes and we want to talk about the show as a whole. So it feels like a great way to do that is to quickly recap all 7 seasons. We're going to try to run through this as quickly as possible so we can go through our thoughts afterwards. I'm going to take the odd numbers, Ceej is going to take the even numbers, and then we're going to have a little conversation between each season where we talk about our top and our least favorite episodes and things like that. So let's start with season one. Season one originally aired September 1993 through May 1994. The summary of season one: Cory Matthews navigates the challenges of 6th grade, guided by his loving family, wise teacher Mr. Feeney, and supported by his mischievous best friend Shawn and quirky classmate Topanga. In season one, our main cast was Ben Savage as Cory Matthews, William Daniels as Mr. Feeney, William Russ as Alan Matthews, Betsy Randall as Amy Matthews, Will Friedle as Eric Matthews, Writer Strong as Shawn Hunter, Daniel Fishel as Topanga Lawrence, Lily Nixie as Morgan Matthews, and Lee Norris as Stuart Minkus. Some overall highlights to know about where our characters are at this point in their journey. Cory is just beginning to understand his life outside of his home and, really kind of, see what the world around him has to offer. Shawn is just introduced as Cory's best friend. We know he has some troublemaking like tendencies, but we don't really know too much yet. And we established Mr. Feeney as the wise yet tough teacher who is no nonsense, but has an unorthodox approach to teaching that is appreciated. So let's talk about key episodes and moments from season one. Ceej, what do you remember of season one?
That's also like another really good thing. It's like when you binge all 7 seasons, you can actually look back at each season and be like, which ones actually did stand out? Like I watched
Yes.
22 episodes of each one of these seasons and which actually made an imprint. Because don't get me wrong, like with most things, like if you watch enough of it, you're like, oh, I remember every episode, especially when it comes on. But like what sticks with me? And for me, I'm gonna say like the key moments, like kind of some of the defining moments we get in season one. You get Cory's alternative friends. That's where Cory and Topanga actually meet. That
Yes.
really does kind of like set the foundation. And to
We
that,
we're introduced to Topanga in this episode. Her and Cory share their first kiss. It's a very classic, very like foundational episode of the series. Sorry.
absolutely. And then, also, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of skipped over it, but the pilot is also very, very key because it sets the foundation so well. We talk about this very often. That and Pod talks about it very often. That pilot actually gives you everything, the entire thesis statement, and it does it so well to where you're like, yes, I will tune into this every week. And
I'm so glad you said that because I feel like honestly, when I was reviewing my favorite episodes of the series, I kept going back to the pilot. I can't believe how strong it was. I can't believe how developed our characters already were. We were introduced to Cory where he was at that time, and then from there expanded out into his world with him. I just think it was so well done.
absolutely. Then we also have Boy Meets Girl. That's another one
Yes.
that's really impactful and really important. And then I'm not
That's
gonna
that. No, just to remind our audience, Boy Meets Girl is the one where Cory and Topanga are like doing laundry and they
yeah,
like have that little cutesy moment. It's like when they first start flirting for the first time post that first kiss.
it's like puberty has hit.
Yes, yeah. And they get the giggles. It's cute.
um, but if we're talking about other like impactful key episodes that will actually come back to be really, really important, Santa's Little Helper is the one where it's the episode that establishes Shawn as a different class from Cory. And we had
Mhm.
already gotten to know Shawn a little bit as his friend, but this is the first time they kind of like say, hey, his father doesn't make as much as your father.
Sure.
And that will come back in so many ways.
It's a defining characteristic of Shawn, and we're really introduced to it within that one episode. I think Pod Meets World does such a great job of talking about this in detail too. For those who haven't listened to their episode on Santa's Little Helper,
And then, of course, The Fugitive is also, if we're talking Shawn, it's one of the most defining ones because it established Shawn as not only of a different class, but kind of like of the bad boy, the I'm going to get into trouble and I'm going to bring Cory into trouble. And it also like really cements Cory and Shawn's friendship as something that the two of them need, you know?
Mhm. I couldn't agree with you more. What's so funny is as we were as I was preparing, we have pages and pages of notes for those who don't know. Like as we prepare for like an episode like this, season 1 had more, I think, favorite episodes of mine than any season we had. All the
Really?
ones you mentioned, but also some other ones that stand out to me are Teacher's Bet is a big one that stands out to me. So like I just think that season 1 is actually a great episode. You know, another episode that I love, and it's not one of my favorites, so I'll just kind of throw it out during this key episode and moments portion, is Father Knows Less. It is the episode in which Alan keeps Cory up to watch the baseball game, and then
Yes.
Cory is sleepy going into class. So there's that
So
ethical
good.
question of how to be in your kid's life when you're working full time. Such a great depiction of fatherhood that I wish, honestly, I missed this portion of the show, how it was dedicated to the family and everything like that. I know Pod talks about it so fondly, but after 7 seasons, you really miss that core family storytelling. So there's lots of key defining moments of season 1. It's clearly such an important season to the series as a whole. What's really, can I just mention this about season 1? I What is your favorite Harry Potter movie? Just curious.
Oh wow! Here's the thing. Honestly, that just totally like blew me aside. So I don't even know. Because I'm not gonna lie, I like the books better than I do the movies.
So
So
many people do. That's fine. You know the reason why I asked this?
why?
Because every Harry Potter fan I know never says that the first movie is their favorite.
That's a
But
good point.
without the first movie, without Christopher Columbus creating the wizarding world for which this world can develop, none of the rest matters. And so in that same sense, season 1 has been foundational in creating the world that we then get to expand upon. So knowing what we know about the importance of season 1, what is your favorite episode of season 1?
I'm gonna say, um, Cory's Alternative Friends. It is just, it's a classic. It's a classic for a reason. Not only because we've spoken ad nauseum about like what that hair episode meant to us. Like
Yes.
we really talked about that, so I don't want to get too much into it. But in general, to actually have that lesson be shown in a way that like really makes sense, to have writing that's really funny and dynamic and like it's filled with heart for these really young characters.
Mm.
This is sixth grade, and we actually feel like the stakes are high
Mhm.
when they like protest together and they get a win. And Topanga and Cory kiss. Like it's all things that now we look back on fondly, but like just objectively, you're like, hey, this is a really good lesson and a really good episode. So I'm gonna say Cory's Alternative Friends.
You know, Ceej, I'm gonna have to agree with you. I think it's the best episode of season 1. I've really thought hard about this compared to the pilot, compared to Teacher's Bet, The Fugitive. Like, there's obviously some great ones, but Cory's Alternative Friends still remains, I think, separate from And Then There Was Shawn. The episode I think I would show people to introduce them to the show.
Yeah.
Truly, I think that's like a great way to get started. If you could miss the pilot and jump in at Cory's Alternative Friends, and I think you're hooked. So I think it's a great episode. What is your least favorite slash worst episode of season 1? Let's
Uh
define it right now.
I'm gonna say, it's funny looking back over it. I think that we already voted this way, and sometimes my picks are going to be like what we had voted for previously, and sometimes I'm gonna be like, with some distance and looking at the entire series,
Yes.
I feel like the episode that I may have shit on actually turns out to be more foundational or has like some kind of redeeming qualities. But It's a Wonderful Night, I don't think there's anything in there for me. I think that is the slog of that season. Don't get me wrong. I also think the God, what is it? It's the spelling bee episode. Also,
Killer
it's just
Bee?
Killer Bee is
Yes.
also another one where you're like, what are we
Not a
doing?
spelling bee episode, a geography tournament episode themed after spelling bees. We had so many issues. You know what's really
Exactly.
funny? I actually went back and listened to our report cards for every season, and those are the same too. And one of the reasons I want to say that, like, What a Wonderful Night is we consider it the worst episode of season one. Not only was it a lazy episode, this is the episode where Eric is pressured by Jason to go out on a date, even though he did not get his license. He takes Alan's car, it gets confiscated, and then it comes out that he didn't have a license. The females, the dates that both Eric and Jason have in that episode are the most, I think, one side of Boy Meets World is the toxicity in which it wrote for women.
Yeah.
And What a Wonderful Night is such a great introduction to that side of Boy Meets World. When we are bitching and complaining about how they're writing women, how they're treating women, the start of that is this fucking episode. So it was our worst then, it's our worst now, nothing's changed. But Killer Bee was a doozy, yeah.
And I'm not gonna lie, another thing about that episode for me is that's the one where Feeny is babysitting Cory and Morgan, and we have Shawn. And my whole thing
Yes.
of like them lying to Feeny, who's like 5 feet away, it's just like I was like, you have to suspend disbelief so much in that episode
I
that I
can't.
was just like,
It
I
makes
could
me
do it all.
not take Feeny seriously that he could
Correct.
be in the same room with kids and not know what they're watching on television.
Correct. So
No.
that's just it. That was like the really thing for me. All right,
Yeah.
are we doing season 2?
Yeah, let's move on to season 2.
Okay, season 2 originally aired September 23rd in 1994 to May 19th, 1995. Summary is Cory and Shawn join Eric at John Adams High, encountering new challenges and seeking their place in the social hierarchy. With Mr. Feeney as principal, new characters like Harley Kiner and his lackeys are introduced. Shawn deals with personal issues, living with the Matthews, and later Mr. Turner. Eric balances studies, SAT prep, and dating. New cast members include Anthony Tyler Quinn as Jonathan Turner, Danny McNulty as Harley Kiner, and Blake Soper as Joey the Rat, Ethan Suplee as Frankie the Enforcer Stachino, Blake Clark as Chet Hunter, and Adam Scott as Griff Hawkins.
Woo! Season 2.
Yeah. Okay. Character highlights. Cory's world gets bigger. Topanga becomes more of a central character, which I would argue that's a maybe. And Shawn, his background and family issues are explored. What do you think are the key moments of season 2?
There's a few. The first thing I want to give attention to is that I think season 2 and season 4 have my favorite season openers. The pilot is a hard thing to pull off, but I also think like your second album defines you from being a one-hit wonder. You know what I mean? And so you need that vampire. You need to prove that, like, you're Olivia Rodrigo, that, like, I have another song. I have more hits.
I have another one in me.
I have another one in me. And to me, back to school, that first day of school where they're learning about the Odyssey, we're being introduced to all of these new characters. You listing all of the new cast, it sounds like a new show with all of the cast that has joined. And for them to seamlessly introduce us to everyone, all the new sets that we're exploring, everything in such a way that, like, you understand Cory's confusion and you're ready to join him in high school, I just think is so well done. I think it's not to say anything about all the characters we're introduced to, because I think they add so much character and fun to the series. But I think Back to School is another one. Another one that I want to bring into light. This was one of my favorite episodes of the season. You did not care for it. I love On the Air.
Really?
Season 2 was so much defined by Cory and Shawn trying to figure out their identity in high school. And can I say, after 7 seasons, I like that as a story point for them. I like them trying to find their place in the world, specifically when they're like 13 years old. They're going through puberty. They feel weird. All of that felt so accurate to my experience as a teenager that I think I can see season 2, even though we graded it very low. I think I can appreciate it a little bit better, understanding that it's specifically pinpointing that the most awkward time of your life. And I think season 2 reflects that.
You know what I think? I think that I don't disagree because I actually, it's funny. I look back on season 2 way more fondly than I think we graded it. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's what Pod calls drop shock. So it is
Yeah,
in fact a completely different show, and you're just kind of like,
sure.
what were we just doing? And the idea of, and I'm gonna say this, you kind of complain routinely that um the thread of I'm trying to define myself every week gets
Yes,
old. That's the thing. It's not that there aren't really good episodes in season 2. It's just that like that theme of like, who am I? You're Cory. It's like, are we doing this again?
sure.
Oh, I'm the most ignored person in school, and it's like, yet every week the world revolves around you and your best friend. I don't think you're as ignored as you think you are.
Season 2 was so much like trying on hats. Oh,
Yes,
we're gonna run a radio station. We're gonna be in a band. I'm gonna join the wrestling team. Like it was all of these things to try to figure out who they were. I appreciate that it was consistent with that theme throughout the season. I just, like you said, I think I would have appreciated more exploration into the diversity of what all that means versus every episode being, well, how are we going to try to fit in this week? Oh, Shawn is going to change Feeny to Weenie. You know, like just it felt so like immature at times. So I think that there was a lot of improvement that could have happened there.
well, then also, so what I want to give season 2 credit for is it establishes that Boy Meets World can and will reinvent itself every
Yeah,
season. I think that's what's actually really good. Is that
sure.
without season 2 taking such a big pivot and being like, hey, we're gonna get rid of some characters that you really enjoy, and we're gonna bring new ones in. We're gonna do like a 50s diner thing in the beginning of the season. Like,
Sure.
like without doing that in the beginning and pulling it off to where it kept its audience, we wouldn't have made it to season 7. But it was willing to be like, hey, we're going to try to be a different show and we're going to try to age with our cast. That
I,
actually is what defines Boy Meets World, and that actually wouldn't be possible without season 2.
I'm so glad you said that because you know, this redefining of the show, each episode season feeling a little different, having its own personality. I don't think season 1, like if we had like a direct copy of that season for season 2, I don't know that the show would have lasted. I
Exactly.
truly don't. Yes, there's a drop shock, but and yes, there's also like season 2 and 3 have this real like nostalgic happy days, like purposefully happy days influence that I think maybe overdoes it a little bit, but Harley Kiner does makes zero sense
None.
in 1994 whenever this aired. But I to your point, it is a great step in terms of defining themselves and growing with their audience. Favorite episodes, least favorite episodes.
Okay. Favorite episodes, I will say Wake Up Little Cory. I feel like that is such a defining,
Mm-hmm.
that is it's so important actually, because we're dealing with very very mature topics. We're
Mm-hmm.
dealing with consent, we're dealing with reputation. We actually use Topanga in a way that not only allows her to be her own character and her own person, but also kind of teaches the lesson to boys that you should respect women. They're more than just something for you to brag about.
Yeah,
And it's a lesson that Boy Meets World doesn't remember itself all the time. So I
definitely.
just think it's so impactful, and it's a great way to handle that topic for that age group. And I honestly can't think of any other show that was able to do so without making it a very special episode.
Definitely. Definitely.
And then also I'm gonna say Sister Teresa. I feel like Sister Teresa
Yeah.
is important because it really does what Sister Teresa does is it establishes that Cory can have chemistry with other characters and other women besides Topanga. It doesn't really allow itself to grow. And I feel like in a modern TV show, we do get Teresa back. We do expand on this world. And I think it's kind of like important because what it does is it highlights one of the Achilles heels of season 2, which is that they've created so many interesting characters that you want to exist with all of them. I want more Turner. I want more Frankie. I want more Joey. I want more Teresa. Like there are all of these characters that are introduced, and I'm like, yeah, let's build this world out. And instead, we just continue to like trim. You know?
It's so interesting that I really wish Michael Jacobs had become a Norman Lair. I really wish he would have seen like, oh, these characters can spin off into their own show. Let's develop it. Because you're right that Boy Meets World does such a good job of introducing us to characters briefly that we instantly care about. And one of the other things that we didn't talk about with entering season 2, which I think is really important, we dropped Minkus, who was such a driving point of comedy throughout season 1. And at the end of season 2, no one is thinking about Minkus. That's how well the show is able to introduce us to new characters that we care about. You were talking about your favorite episodes. The one thing I noticed about season 2, it's a lot of fun episodes. It's a like, 7 Minutes in Heaven. It's, we get the Grapes of Wrath episode where they're, trying to work on protesting their unions and everything like that. The band episodes, Sister Teresa, the turnaround dance, Cyrano, where Frankie has a crush on the girl and Cory has to whisper into his ear.
I do not like that episode.
I know. I
do not like that episode.
Danger Boy when they're on the roller coaster. There's just a lot of defining points of that. The episode that I think is I do agree that Wake Up Little Cory is probably the best of the season, but just to kind of highlight something else, the finale of season 2, Home, where the thing here's what I want to talk about with season 2. One of the things that we're introduced to is Chet Hunter.
Love Blake Clark.
Hunter.
Love Blake
Clark. Such a phenomenal presence on the show. I want more of him. I love every second of screen time that we get with him. But to introduce him in season 2, but to make the focus, the show decided like, hey, we're going to focus on the personal home lives of these students. You have to remember, all we really did during season 1 was like, you're the teacher, I'm the student. You're the parent, I'm the kid. And this show in season 2 was like, let's examine that deeper. What if there's kids who have a terrible home life and they're struggling in school as well? Like, I just think deciding to take a closer look at Shawn, develop him in that way, everything that happens at the end of season 2, where he's like, I don't know where I belong. And then eventually Turner comes in to like, basically semi-adopt him temporarily, is such a defining part of Shawn's character arc that I think it deserves a shout out. So I'm gonna throw out Hope. Before we exit season 2, what is your worst episode of season 2?
I said it then, I'll say it again. I do not like Who's Afraid of Cory Wolf. Like I enjoy the guest star appearance. I think that's fun, but it's just so out of left field, and it's the most, to me, it's the most reminiscent of like what we will eventually get in Girl Meets World, where it's so Disney, it's so surreal.
It's wacky. It's a wacky episode.
And something that we don't ever really do again.
Yeah.
Like, I think you could argue that
I stand to disagree. I think that this falls under the alternative timelines, like the time travel episodes.
I was going to say, like, you could argue that the time travel episodes, but even that, to me, the time travel episodes are in a league of their own because they are consistent. Because we do this time and time again. We don't really get a Cory's Alternative Friends-esque.
Sure.
We always, like, you know what? I'll say that we, from this point on, will always take a swing. We do like the Real World episode. We do the Truman Show episode. Like, so there are, in fact, episodes where it's like we suspend disbelief and we're a little bit more of a concept than we are a TV show. But if this kicks that off, I hate it even more.
I can't agree with you enough. I hate Who's Afraid of Cory Wolf. I feel like this probably has fans out there. I found this to be a waste of a Halloween episode. I found this to be, there's so many interesting ways to talk about puberty. And I love this idea of like a werewolf turning into a werewolf and the comparisons of that with puberty. I think you see so much of that. I think Teen Wolf just does this concept better. And I just don't think it's relevant. I think it's of season 2, you could skip this episode and miss nothing. So that's kind of my bar, by the way, for where we're at with episodes. I'm like, if you could skip this episode, you don't need to watch it.
Absolutely. What you said, I kind of want to pick up on and say, if Michael Jacobs had become a Norman Lear-esque person, each season, I want to be like, what spinoff would you want? because I think that
Oh,
you said it
yes.
perfectly. I feel like if season one, it's Minkus. Like if Minkus doesn't join back, what is Minkus up to? Where's Minkus at in this new school? Is he
Young
the smartest one?
Sheldon could have happened
Yes,
in the 90s with Minkus,
exactly,
100%.
absolutely. So for season two, what is our spinoff?
Okay.
I think I know, but what would you say our spinoff is?
Okay. Just because we didn't do this for season one, I'm just going to backtrack a little bit. Season one is Minkus getting the report that he is literally too smart for the school he's in and has to go to a school of geniuses where he is not the smartest person in the class. And then we see that play out. Season two for me would be Harley is sent to reform school, but we then follow Harley to that said reform school. Teresa's a bigger part of it. Joey and Frankie all of a sudden get sent in as well. And we're seeing what happens to bullies when they become the bullied. I think that would be the spinoff.
You always like each one of those is like, this is your identity, but is it?
But is it?
I love it. And essentially what you're saying with Mikas is smart guy. We just get
Yes.
smart guy. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay. Season three.
Season three. Okay, yeah. Originally aired September 22nd, 1995 through May 17th, 1996, season 3 finds Cory jumping into a new romantic relationship with Topanga while continuing his schemes with Shawn. Shawn moves in with Mr. Turner, building a powerful bond. Mr. Feeney faces challenges from his younger teaching staff, and Eric struggles with academic pressures and not getting into college. In season 3, we are introduced to Alex Dessert, I don't know how to say his name, as Eli Williams. We have Lindsay Ridgway stepping into the role of Morgan Matthews, a major shift. And I also want to throw a shout out to Brittany Murphy, who makes a few appearances as Trini. Let's just to remind our audience where our characters are at in season 3. Cory and Topanga begin their relationship, their official boyfriend-girlfriend relationship in season 3. Shawn, however, is struggling with his family situation. He develops his relationship with Turner, but they have a lot of rocky moments within their own relationship. As you can recall, at the end of season 2, Shawn is shocked to find out that Turner has yet to adopt him. So there's just a lot of rocky roads in Shawn and Turner's relationship. And at the end of season 3, Eric learns that he is not going to college with his friends. So there's a lot of things happening there. What are your key episodes and your key moments of season 3?
For me, some of the most important episodes are things like The Grass is Always Greener, because you get that it's kind of like our first hint that Cory and Topanga, they have a problem that they don't really ever solve.
Can I just quickly remind our audience, The Grass is Always Greener is the episode where Cory attends another school party and pretends to be Shawn, while Topanga is also attending that party, pretending to be a French girl. At that moment, they realize they're unhappy in their relationship and they decide to break up to preserve their friendship. I apologize.
Absolutely.
Continue.
No. I completely think that was great. Then we get an episode like Stormy Weather, and Stormy Weather is very crucial to Eric's. It's not only where we kind of like remember what his goal in life is at this point in time, which is to become a weatherman, but he actually shows that he's good at it. And the only thing that really hinders him from pursuing that is the lack of opportunity. That's it. It is not that he can't be successful. And very often, when we get into the later conversations, I'm going to talk about a turning point in each and every character and what I think changed them and when I think they started to change. And for me, as long as Eric still conceivably is pursuing being a weatherman, I think he's original Eric. The moment I think that stops is when I'm like, I think that we've lost what made this character work. If that makes any sense.
A dream died and a soul was shattered. I can't wait to get into it. Yeah, I think there's season 3 actually has a lot of important episodes. Like, obviously, you have My Best Friend's Girl, which is the season opener. Not the strongest, but you do have Cory and Topanga kind of, beginning their relationship. What I meant to say, the episode where Cory says he loves Topanga for the first time, the jean jacket scene, I
don't like it, but I will admit that it is key to the Cory and Topanga lore.
Yes. One other episode that I want to point out, which is so interesting, specifically finishing season 7, is season 3, episode 4, He Said, She Said. That is the episode in which the guidance counselor encourages Shawn to take time to go to Europe. Is this not what we fucking said when we reviewed season 7? Shawn needs to be in Europe. It was
He
planted
does.
here, and if through the end of the series, I'm still feeling like he needs to go to Europe. So that's just one thing. Ray Vaughn, an episode that you did not like. I love Ray
I
Vaughn.
need you to. I will die on this hill. I need someone to explain to me why this episode is even supposed to work.
I'll tell you, because Mickey Dolenz and Davy Jones show up. It's the monkeys,
Okay.
motherfucker.
Okay. You're telling me you get only 3 episodes of the entire season to share.
No, not at
Okay.
all. Not at all. I'm just throwing out some key moments.
Okay.
One thing I want to say is the episode City Slickers, season 3, episode 11. This is the episode where Cory and Shawn go to Feeney's cabin and we learn about him and his dead wife. Such an important episode. We're learning about Feeney and Shawn's relationship outside the school is strengthened. Such a key episode. I love it so much.
It's City Slackers.
City Slackers. Thank you.
It's City Slackers, but I completely agree. I was saving that for one of my favorites, but it's such a defining one, not only because it gives us Feeney and this background of him and who he was when he was married, but it does give us another anchor to Shawn of seeing that Shawn is special to Feeney. And we get the
100%.
first kind of inkling that Feeney cares more about these kids than he says he does.
100%. It's such a great episode. It's included in my favorites, my top list. You already mentioned stormy weather. So one episode that I want to give some shout out to, is Heart is a Lonely Hunter. It's the episode featuring Larissa Olenek. This is where Topanga tells Shawn, you don't know women. You treat us like objects. We're not interested. You have a terrible reputation, and like really calls Shawn out in a way that Shawn actually listens and responds to. Can you imagine on Boy Meets World, a female giving a man feedback and that man adjusting his behavior? It's not been seen since, and it was seen then. I loved it. So yeah, lots of key moments. I think I never sang for my legal guardians, another episode that comes to mind. But just lots of fun episodes in season 3.
Well, I mean, I feel like it's so funny because season 3 is key for a lot of things that we consider foundational for Boy Meets World. So, like I said, it's like the Cory and Topanga relationship. That really kind of gets defined, and like the things that we come on time and time again: lack of loyalty, lack of fidelity, not being able to communicate in the right way. These are all the things that like they come up against time and time again. Shawn's family and his relationship to his past holding him back. That's something that we come up time and time up again. Eric being smart in a different way that isn't always rewarded by academia. That is something that we get time and time again. So there are so many interesting things that season 3 does that really develops our characters and continues to lay this foundation of the lore that becomes Boy Meets World. So to me, I feel like it may be one of the most important seasons.
When I think about season 3, I think about we're kind of being introduced to this show's I don't know. The way it reinvents itself is to like make drastic changes to trim the fat, to get rid of Harley and Griff, like the kind of bully characters that were such a staple in season 2, and be like, we're going to mature past that, to introduce Eli and the idea of media literacy and having episodes that dive into that, I think makes season 3 so much more richer. Everything from the Weatherman episode, The Truth and Consequences, all kind of doesn't happen without Eli. So I think he plays such a good role. He's along with Minkus and those characters that I think I'm going to miss, but somehow the show makes me not think about it.
I think it kind of distracts you. It always gives you something new to focus on.
Yes.
But at the exact same time, it's created like very much like we were saying earlier, it's created this world to where if anything, I want this season's spinoff, especially since we end up not having Turner be as big of a role as he
Mm,
would be, we find out about Turner's history. We find
yeah.
out about his past. We meet his best friend, Eli. I think that this is a prime spinoff right there. If you want to talk about the Norman Lear of it all, I feel like Turner and Eli and, Turner having to go back to Connecticut and Eli for some reason is with him and just two single guys trying to make it as teachers. Like, I feel like that's kind of like what we would get from this season because we've established such a very great. And also, the thing is, I think that this season they got a little too close to the sun in terms of Shawn's character because
Mm.
I feel like if we're going to be honest, the real spinoff is Turner and Shawn. I think it really becomes close to becoming their show because they have such good chemistry. There's so many great ideas. And the idea of making the show about them and not about Ben and his story and Cory and everything that he's going through was something they had to squash. So that's my interpretation.
It's so important that we talk about Jonathan Turner because I don't know if there's a season in which he has a bigger uh uh imprint on than season 3. This is the season in which Shawn is living with Turner. All of Shawn shenanigans, the double lie episode where they both tell a lie because they want to go out on a date, but they don't want the other person to know. The little piggy episode where he
I was
gets
thinking
little
that.
Cory and he's trying to like make this new home something that's comfortable for him. Like there's so much about Shawn and his like journey with identity and family and finding his place, finding home that is represented through season 3 in his relationship with Turner. I love that you said that. I actually don't want to see that spinoff after season 3 because I do feel like Shawn has a place on this show. I would rather see a spinoff in which we have Eli. Eli, who's been introduced to the world of teaching, is like, you know what? I think this is something I like. I think I want to go back to my home neighborhood and contribute back to the community I came from. It turns into Welcome Back, Kotter. He's back. He's living with his mother, who he's taking care of, who's like an eccentric figure. He's still trying to be a ladies' man, but he has to take care of his mom. We're introduced to a ragtag group of kids from the hood that he sees, potential in, and he encourages them to grow. I want the Steve Harvey show, but I want it to be Eli's spinoff show.
Do you trust these writers to handle that topic with the sensitivity that it would require?
You know what? That's a great question. All I have to say about that is that I think white people were at the helm for both Family Matters and the Hughleys, so I think they could figure it out.
Okay, I'm not saying that. Does Wesley Jonathan join him? And for some reason, TJ
Yes.
is there?
Yes. For a party.
Or if we're gonna be honest, why does Eli have to go like all the way back home? Or I don't even know where it is. Why can't we just be in Philadelphia again? Like
Sure.
we
Show
know
the other side of the track.
Yeah, exactly. That's all I'm saying. And I think you're right. I didn't say that I wanted the Eli spinoff. I'm saying necessarily that that's actually to me what the show is becoming. And that was where the heart of this season really is. So I
Yeah.
just feel like I feel like they had to like squash it in season 4 because they're like, oh, we got too close to we got too close to the Urkel effect.
100%. 100%. What is your favorite episode of season 3?
City Slackers is actually going to be.
Oh.
That's why I corrected you because I was like, that is actually my favorite episode of the season. I feel like it's such a great representation of Cory and Shawn, of Feeney. We get like just like hearing the backstory of Feeney. That's another spinoff that we've talked about before.
Sure.
Of like being like, oh, what does this version of Feeney look like? So yeah, that's one of my favorite episodes.
An amazing episode. I think the best episodes of this season are Truth and Consequences. I think this is the episode in which Cory has to do a video about, something for the news team at school. runs a news story that shows janitor Bud cheating at his job, which leads
Yep.
to janitor Bud being fired and him having dealing with the ethical gray areas of life. I love them exploring. There is no right answer. There is no wrong answer. You just have to follow your heart. I just think it's such a great concept. I love it when the show explores those gray areas and really dives into Cory's confusion with handling those. Because I think as a kid, it's so relatable to be introduced into those gray areas where you don't know and you're looking for someone to tell you what's the right answer, and there is none.
Truth and Consequences is the wake up little Cory of this season.
100%.
And I agree with you, which is the alternative Friends. And
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
it's so interesting that they're all at the exact same around placement in
yeah.
the season. And then something that I forgot, but I cannot stress enough, Stormy Weather is also probably one of my all-time favorite episodes
Sure.
in general. So that's
Love
a really, really good
one of my
episode.
favorite Eric episodes, one of my favorite Alan episodes as well. Have to give Alan credit because he was such a key part of these first 3 seasons specifically. One other episode that I have to throw out as my favorite for season 3, The Grass is Always Greener. I know we've already talked about this. This two high school students coming to the decision that we would have a healthier relationship as friends than in a relationship, so important. I wish the show would have hung out in that area a little bit longer because, in 2 seasons they end up getting fucking married. Like, it's so crazy. But that idea that like we're better as friends than in a relationship and we're mature enough to come to that understanding at a time where we won't put our friendship in jeopardy, I think is such a mature, probably one of the most mature conversations for kids to have within the series. So that I have to throw that out.
I can't remember the exact quote, but like the idea of what Topanga says, maybe the people who hate each other are the people who didn't leave when they were supposed to.
Yes.
Like
Oh
that
my God, bruh. So
that
true.
idea alone, it's actually pretty amazing. Okay, worst episodes of season 3.
The worst episode of season 3 to me was I Was a Teenage Spy. I think we have a different take on this, but I throughout the series, the time travel episode will be my least favorite. I Was a Teenage Spy is the episode where Cory plugs in a microwave, gets sent back into Happy Days. Pat Morana, fucking the
Is
Karate Kid coach, shows up,
yep.
and there's like a Boris and
Boris
Natasha
and
Russian
Natasha.
spy thing.
Yep.
It's all Cold War based. And it just like it's an episode that's supposed to educate kids on the 50s, I guess, but it also feels so weird and so random. And I think it just deserves to be skipped. So that's my least favorite.
I think I'm gonna say I actually like that episode a little bit more than you do. A little bit
Yeah.
more. I agree that it could be skipped. Train of Fools is one where I also am just like this, none of it makes
Yeah.
sense. It's all not good. The storyline with Turner and Eli isn't great. Like I just think we could do without it. And then also I'm gonna say Hometown Hero, mostly because it feels out of place
Yeah.
for this season. It feels very much like a season 2 or even a season 1 episode. And I think that's kind of like my biggest problem
You
with
know,
here.
we're going to talk about this later, but we're going to talk about like the biggest bruh moments. And I went through the series, I went through every episode, and I kept track of every episode in which they commit a crime. Bruh. The way crime is handled in the series is really ridiculous.
They
But
are two
yeah,
white boys, so
Hometown Hero is the one where Cory starts the fire and then goes on the news as the person who put out the fire. It feels very season 2. It feels very much like Finding My Identity. It feels like it's a relic of the past. I agree. And yeah, Train of Fools is awful.
yeah,
It's an awful episode.
absolutely. Okay, season 4.
Mm.
Season 4
Oh, bruh, season 4, nourishment to my soul. Give it to me.
Season 4 originally aired September 20th, 1996 to May 2nd, 1997. The summary is Eric struggles with his future after not getting into college and explores various paths to find his purpose. Cory and Topanga's relationship is tested when Topanga moves to Pittsburgh, and Shawn grapples with his mother's return and Mr. Turner's departure. New class members include Shireen Mitchell as Werner Hunter, Leon White as Vader slash Francis Stechino, EJ De La Pina as Herman Stechino, and character highlights are Cory struggles with family dynamics, including Alan's job change and maintaining his relationship with Topanga. Topanga faces challenges of moving away from her hometown and getting comfortable with her parents. Shawn demonstrates business savvy and street smarts in various ventures while dealing with the family's instability of his parents, return to his life, and struggling with the Turner's departure. Eric faces the reality of not getting into college and explores different paths to find his future. Okay, what key episodes do you think are in season 4?
The whole damn season. I mean, I've made no like I haven't
Attempt to
kept
hide.
attempt to hide my love for season 4 and everything it does. There's so many key episodes and key moments that I want to point out. One is You Can't Go Home Again. I think season 4, like season 2, has a fantastic season opener. I think this might be the best season opener other than the pilot, where we're introduced to Eric. He's on his road trip with Cory. He doesn't want to go home because he didn't get into college. He's like, do I want to hang out in the sprinkle town? And Alan kind of convinces him to go home and see what else he's capable of versus settling. This is also the same moment that Alan is struggling with if he wants to be a grocer. And like, I'm telling you from personal experience, you don't want to settle. You will not like yourself. Love that. Love that whole thing. We have Hair Today, Goon Tomorrow, which I can't say enough about in terms of developing Topanga. Finally, an episode focused on her where she gets a spotlight. It took 4 seasons for Topanga to get like a legitimate episode. And like, yes, she pops in season 2 and 3, but I just really don't know that we've had an episode dedicated to Topanga like this one since or before. So I'll say that about Hair Today, Goon Tomorrow.
I will say with Hair Today, Goon Tomorrow, my issue with it is even though we finally get something about Topanga, it is not about how smart she is. It is not about how great of a friend she's always been. It is mostly about her looks.
Yes.
And I do think that that's like I cannot deny that it's a key episode. It's foundational to the character. It's foundational to the series. But at the exact same time, knowing what we end up giving this character, I have to say that it's it's important in not always the best ways.
I mean, it's this and Long Walk to Pittsburgh, which she gets this season, which I think are actually standout episodes. I think they're some of the best episodes of the season. But you do have also an episode like 16 Candles and 400-Pound Men, where it's supposed to be about Topanga, but she plays a very little part in it. So yes, it's like one step forward, 2 steps back in a lot of ways for Topanga's character. We are introduced Fish and Verna, introduced to Shawn's mom, the whole Chet Verna, we're gonna try to raise you. We're gonna try to make an honest effort out of this parenting thing, which is gonna fizzle out and we're not gonna talk about ever again. Is a big part of season 4 and also a big part of defining why Shawn has the trauma that he has going into seasons 5, 6, and 7. So I think that's important. Another one, Dangerous Secret, I think is a big episode. Turkey Day, where we're introduced to like the actual class dynamics of the Hunters versus the Matthews. Such an important episode. You get B&B's B&B, such a favorite. Easy Street, Shawn joins the mob. Chick Like Me, a quiz show, security guy. I can keep going on.
I will say this in terms of like key moments that I feel like are crucial to defining the series and everything else. I think you said it, but we can't really skip over how important A Long Walk to Pittsburgh is. I think a
Yes.
writer said it best, where he's like, "Oh, this becomes the Bible of the Cory and Topanga
100%.
relationship. It really rewrites history, but also becomes the thing that the show in the series continues to go back to into why this love is important."
It's almost like the show changes its thesis midway through with
It
that
really
episode.
does, basically because of it. And we are almost midway through the series, so it's very interesting that at this point in time with A Long Walk to Pittsburgh, we now know that Cory and Topanga will be in game.
Yeah.
So you get that. Then you get a lot of Shawn's backstory. But what I think is amazing is we actually really lean into Shawn being a son of Chet in my mind. Like,
yes.
This season is the most like, oh, it would make sense that this kid with this background, with these parents, would become this type of individual. He would be very business savvy. He would understand how to adapt and make an impression on the mob or run a B&B business overnight. Like that's the kind of person that he is.
Yes.
And it's sitcom, but it's also there. It's kind of like he almost becomes like the Phoebe Buffet in the sense of like, is there anything he can't do? But also all of that is built on this traumatic past that it's kind of a joke, but also really influences who he is.
You know, something I didn't realize until you just said it, which I think is really interesting to point out, is that we loved season 4 for showing us this street savvy, business smart version of Shawn, but we only get that Shawn when he's living with both of his parents. And then when his family falls apart, we lose that aspect of Shawn. So it really is the Chet in him that we see in the mob episode. It's the Chet in him that we see in the Airbnb episode. But when he loses his family dynamic, his aspirations to be creative in that realm are dissipate with it, which I just think is really interesting.
Absolutely. And then you get something like An Affair to Forget, which is it's important because very much like um A Long Walk to Pittsburgh is defining for Cory and Topanga. An
Yes.
Affair to Forget is defining for Cory and Shawn.
Yeah.
And I just thought that that was something that I definitely wanted to acknowledge.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, when it comes to favorite episodes for season 4, it's a little hard for me to pinpoint one that I think is the best of a stellar season. But if I had to guess, for me, it would be Hair Today, Goon Tomorrow. I think that is the alternative Friends episode. I think that is you can watch this on the Disney Channel without knowing anything about these characters and still get brought into the show. B&B's is very fun. Long Walk to Pittsburgh's great, but it does involve like a really like a knowledge of these characters and their history, which I don't think Hair Today, Goon Tomorrow does. And one other episode that is not my favorite, but I just have to point it out, is the finale from season 4, which is Learn to Fly. Not because of any of the Cory cheating on Topanga storylines, which we will get to, but for being the episode that propels us into that season 5, propels us into coexisting within high school and college at the same time. We have Eric getting into college, and in season 5, we see him in college, which I think, to your point, helps us transition the rest of the cast. So this decision to put Eric in college in season 4, I think, is really imperative to the development of the entire series.
I've talked about this a lot. I love Learn to Fly. I think it's an amazing
Mm-hmm.
episode in general. I think it's another case of actually having really adult conversations in a way that's accessible and not too mature.
Yeah.
And I can't wait till we get to like the end and really like reflect on the entire series because seeing how we start season 4 with Eric and how much work we put into developing this character and
Yes.
pulling him away from a small town where he actually could have been the mayor, pulling him away
Yeah.
from a career of being a weatherman, pulling him away from all of these things that he actually seemed to want to do so that he
Yes.
could follow the path that he was told to follow
Mm-hmm.
by his father. All the work that we do in season 4, knowing where we end up in season 7, it's kind of like I mentioned it before. I'm watching House of the Dragons, and a lot of people are like, while this story is great, knowing that this is all a setup for the ending that we get in Game of Thrones,
Yeah.
this kind of takes the wind out of it because it's like you're saying all of these things and you're talking about this legend, but we know how it ends.
Sure.
So it actually you kind of look at your screen screaming, "No, Eric, stay in the small town." You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think there is a version of a spinoff there. Like, honestly, we talk about spinoffs a lot. I don't think the spinoff comes now for Eric, but I do think that this kind of paves the way for one if they, you know, obviously this is something they talked about, but I think there is room for an Eric spinoff somewhere. I don't know that we get it at the end of season 4, but maybe at the end of season 5 or 6.
Really quickly, my favorite episodes. I'm gonna say B&B's B&B. I've said it before. I'll say it again.
Yes.
I feel like it's great comedically. I feel like the cast is so in their element. I feel like it's well balanced, and we do get more of the Feeny and Eric dynamic, which is just beautiful in and of
Yeah.
itself. And I think it's like some of the best balance that we've gotten with from Feeny in a while with the main 4 kids.
You know, there's a moment, I think it's in season 4, during the is it during the quiz show episode? Maybe it is, I'm not sure. Or no, it's in season 3. I'm sorry. I know this is season 3, but I just want to point this out. It's This Little Piggy. That's the episode where, yes, Shawn adopts the pig, but in the B story is Feeny taking Eric to the opera. such a great episode. I just have to point out that storyline. There's so much of Eric that I love. This is my favorite version of Eric in season 4. This is my favorite version of Shawn in season 4. This is also my favorite version of Cory in season 4. So there's a lot to love about it.
I think this is my favorite version of Topanga.
Oh, well, there you go. Like every character is at a high. What's your least favorite episode of season 4?
My least favorite would be Singled Out. So
Yeah.
it doesn't feel necessary. It doesn't feel important. And also, I know that people disagree. I don't think that kind of the staple ones, Cult Fiction or A Long Walk to Pittsburgh, I don't feel like they're good. I think that they are iconic, but I don't think they're good episodes.
I was so expecting you to say Shallow Boy because you've been on record as saying that you don't like that episode so many times.
But here's the thing, Shallow Boy is fun, at least. Like Singled Out isn't fun. It's not fun. I don't really feel like we're getting anything out of that. And yeah, I feel like we could lose it. A Long Walk to Pittsburgh, I feel like it's iconic because Topanga comes back, but I feel like that actually needed a little bit more space in between for us to fill it. And Cult Fiction, we just talked to the cast about this. Cult Fiction is another one where it's like it's a good idea, but it should have been a two-parter. It feels kind of crammed in, and it feels like hollow because we take this really religious turn towards the end and then go nowhere with it.
100%. I think Singled Out is the worst episode of the season. I enjoyed Singled Out, so that says something that this just has great episodes. I also think, in reflection, I think that if someone wanted to skip fishing for Verna, they're fine too.
Also,
simply because Verna is prompted up to be such an important player for season 4, only for them to simply never bring her back after we spent Thanksgiving with her in a way that's like so weird and jarring that I'm like, you know what? I think this might be confusing for you to be introduced to a character who is prompted up to be this big player, but actually just doesn't do anything. So I think that's actually more confusing.
You know, it's interesting because the thing about Fishing for Verna is it introduces Verna in such a heartfelt way, and it doesn't make sense for if you skip that episode, then you don't really understand who that character is in Janitor Dad. But you only really need, like, they need each other to exist, and they also undo the work of each other. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, Fishing for Verna like introduces Verna as like this really heartfelt character who you actually understand she may have a reason and a past and motivation for like not being with her family. And then Janitor Dad, she's just a cliche trailer park mom.
Yeah.
And it also shows the depth of Chet in Janitor Dad, of like him needing to and trying to be there and keep his family together, but in a way that we don't really see in Fishing for Verna. So like it's really important for each parent individually, but I feel like you would have to take both of those episodes out in order to really like keep the season moving. But also, without knowing who Shawn's parents are, you don't truly get what Shawn is coming from.
Yeah, definitely. You know, it's interesting. I don't know that there's a spin-off idea that I have for season 4. You know, I like all the characters and where they are at the beginning, the middle, the end of the series. One thing I do want to say is that in the same way the season 2 felt a little happy days, season 3, specifically the first half, season 4, let's just say, season 4, specifically the first half of it, feels very Roseanne-esque in their attempt to bring in Verna and Chet and define their tone, their comedic tone, and their presence within the show. You know, I feel like we've been able to tell every single time the show is trying to reach out for a trend. And I think that this was one that, you know, it attempted to, and it felt like it wasn't a good fit and it backed away from. So there's a lot about the first chunk of season 4 that even though I enjoyed, it feels like it leads nowhere. I think that like, it's not until you get to like An Affair to Forget that the show really has like, I don't know, a rhythm to it. So
it's so funny that you say that, because if we're going to be honest, like you were like, I don't think there's a spinoff. I didn't either, but then after you said that, I was like, oh, it's Chet searching for Verna again. Like that's the spinoff. Chet on his in his truck, looking for his wife who ran off again. Is he going to find her? We never know. He's always one clue off. You know what I'm saying?
I think to follow a deadbeat dad who's not hanging out with his son would be a hard thing for ABC to sell, but I don't doubt that they could.
No,
I don't
are
doubt
you
that
telling
Blake
me
Clark can pull that off.
I say you don't see Blake Clark as a trucker who just goes from state to state. Maybe he's solving crimes. I don't know. I'm just saying.
Yes, please make him a crime solver.
I'm just saying, moving from state to state, trying to find his wife. Again, every now and then we get like a little clue.
I have the Chet spinoff. I have it.
Okay.
Due to his years of being able to track Berna, he's had a reputation with his friends at the trucking establishments as a hunter, as like a head hunter. So like any single time someone's missing, fuck yeah, Chet Hunter is hunting. It's called The Hunter. And it's literally about him going from town to town, people being like, I haven't been able to find my family, and him being like, I have this special skill, and him finding that family member for them and reuniting them. It's Touched by an Angel with Chet Hunter.
I was thinking it's Touched by an Angel. He's always reuniting families.
Yes.
Except his own.
Except his own. That's the tragedy. For every family that reunites, he loses a relationship in his life.
It also explains why he has kids all over the place.
Ain't that the truth?
Okay, you guys, this conversation is too good to just keep in one episode.
100%. We can't fit it all, but we appreciate you guys hanging out with us. And we will continue this conversation next week for part 2 of our series report card.
Thank you for listening to Bro Meets World. Check us out at bromeetsworld@gmail.com or at Bro Meets World on all the places. We really hope that you're enjoying this conversation and look forward to next week.
Later, bros.
Later, bros.
This episode of Bro Meets World was produced by Ceej and edited by Tony Curtis. Bro Meets World's a 2 Free Tokens media production.
When this boy meets world.